Hi everybody, it's Courtney, and today we are using the Happy Bee Day stamp set by Honeybee Stamps, and I'm actually only just using these two little gifts, these gift boxes. We are using non-Christmas stamps to create our projects today. So I'm going to take a piece of Neenah Solar White 80-pound cardstock. I initially trimmed this down by 1/4 of an inch. I ended up trimming it down a little bit more later, but I knew I wanted to create a mat for it because it's a 1-layer card. So I am going to take my T-square ruler and a pencil, and I'm kind of just using my work surface to kind of find the middle, make sure that my lines are straight, things like that. And what I am going to be doing is I am going to be drawing out H's. Well, I'm going to stick to the H's right now. So I'm going to keep my measurements very simple. So each little part of the A or the H, I guess each side is going to be 1/4 of an inch, just because that's what's easiest for me working on this work surface. I am going with a pretty light hand with my pencil just in case I mess up, and I know I have to eventually erase these pencil lines anyway. So this will make it easier for me to erase them just by going in with a very, very light hand. Now, what I want this to say is I want it to say ho, ho, ho down the card. So I obviously am going to need to make an O as well, but I don't trust myself to make a circle. I don't trust myself to even draw a straight line on my own. So what I ended up doing is I ended up taking one of my circle dies, and I think this is one of the wonky stitched circle dies, but it doesn't really matter. And I'm just going to trace the outside as well as the inside. Now my pencil slipped a few times, not a big deal, because these are going to be just our guide for stamping. Now, what my plan was, and I'm sure you guys have seen them because a lot of different companies have them, there are stamp sets that have the entire alphabet, but within the letters, there may be flowers or different kinds of images that are part of the letters themselves. And that is kind of what I wanted to go with here. My images were a little bit too large, especially being I was very limited as far as what I could use for this one. But I would definitely do it again, maybe for a different theme. But this was actually really fun to create. So once I had my letters kind of sketched out a little bit, I am going to go ahead and stamp out these two little presents. I did initially make masks for them, but I didn't actually need them. So I started stamping these out with the Blackout ink by Ink on 3. This is the only part here that I actually used a mask. And then I realized that the presents were a little bit large for the size of the letter, so I wasn't really going to overlap them too much, so I really didn't need the masks at all. But I'm just kind of scattering them throughout the entire card. I'm just making sure that they're kind of stuck onto one letter or the other. I'm not really putting any right in the center of each of the letters, if that makes sense. I'm just kind of making it part of each one of the letters. And I kind of just scattered them, eyeballed it. Doesn't really have to be anything too crazy thought out anyway. But once my images were stamped, then I need to make my letters stand out a little bit. I don't want to be doing any no line coloring here. So I am going to take an EK Success journaling pen, and I'm going to go right over my pencil lines that I've already created. And this way I can kind of clean up some of those areas that I may have just wasn't overly careful, being it was just a guide. Now, the EK Success journaling pen is a Copic Safe pen, so you can use any Copic Safe pen here. These are the ones that I love the most. They are unfortunately discontinued, but I will link something very, very similar in the description box in case you're looking for an alternative to the multi-liner, a definitely cheaper alternative to the multi-liner. So now that I have my letters and all of my images stamped out, I am going to erase all of my pencil lines, all the pencil lines that may be showing through where the presents are or where I wasn't really all that careful with the letters. You want to make sure that you do this before you do your coloring. Once you color over it, you will not be able to erase it. Now, I'm not going to show you all of the coloring because it was a little repetitive, but I'm basically using Cool Gray's red combination and a green combination. And I'm using the cool gray combination to make it as if the objects are white. So one set of letters are going to be white, one is going to be green, and one is going to be red. And whatever presents are attached to those letters are going to be the two opposite colors. So I always started with my grays because those are the lighter colors. And if I accidentally touch the tip of this marker to the darker area of green or any of the reds, I'm going to drag that color out, and I want to avoid that. So I like to start with my grays first. So I'm just doing my shading off to the left-hand side of each of the letters, or each of the objects really, and then just blending that out each time. I am also creating a shadow underneath each one of the presents themselves. So sometimes the C1 will leave kind of a harsh line. So I either take a colorless blender or a C00 just to kind of get rid of that harsh line. It doesn't really matter. They're pretty much the same. The C00 is one step up from a colorless blender. The O looked a lot darker than the H, so I did go back in with the H with just a little bit darker areas, I guess. I just brought it out a little bit further so that the two letters would match a little bit more. Now for the presents, like I said, so these presents, because they're attached to white letters, will be red and green. So I am going to show you just a little bit of the coloring, mainly so that you can see the color combinations that I used. Now for each one of these, I did go right in with my darkest color. This will avoid any bleeding because my paper will not be oversaturated, and they're pretty small areas, so I'm not really worried about getting the perfect blend. So you'll see here me kind of stop here and there, and that's because Macy was in the hallway and she was meowing so weird and loud. It sounded like there was an old woman yelling in my house. So I was a little concerned, making sure she was okay. But basically what I'm doing is I am starting my shading from the base of each one of the presents, whether it's the ribbon or the present itself, and just adding some shading, kind of some random shading to that bow. For the other bow, the shading will be towards the center of it. Now you'll see here that I'm going with my greens first. For each set of letters, I saved my reds for last because, like I said, the reds tend to bleed the most, and you don't want to touch any red areas with any other marker, or else you will drag out that color. And I will show you where that happened, even though I was nowhere near the reds at the end of the video. So for the ribbons, it's pretty simple. It's just shading from the base up. And for the present itself, I am putting a little bit of a shadow where we're kind of looking at the corner of the present, just to make sure that it gives some sort of dimension so it doesn't look like one flat surface. So for the reds, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to keep this small part in here just so that you can see the color combination that I'm using. But once again, I am starting with that darkest color first. Now, if you guys watch my videos often, this is my favorite red combination, especially for Christmas. So you very rarely will see me stray away from this combination. I just think it's perfect. It gives me just the right amount of contrast, and they are very, very easy to blend together. So if you've ever watched my videos for any length of time, this combination will be very familiar to you. So I went ahead and continued coloring the other two sets of letters. Well, I finished up this one first and then went on to the other two set of letters. Like I said, just switching up the colors to make sure that the letters were different colors than the presents attached to them, but I stayed with the same color combinations throughout the entire card. Now, once it was all done, I did have quite a few coloring mistakes where I went out of the lines, especially the letters, which is where I guess I wasn't as careful. So I'm going to take no, I'm not taking a colorless blender. Don't take a colorless blender. Take a white gel pen and just very carefully go over those areas. This will cover up the ink color, and it won't even be noticeable anymore. If you take a colorless blender, remember that just moves the color. It doesn't take it away or blend it. So I'm also adding some polka dots and some stripes to some random presents. I didn't add it to all of them, and I made sure that I didn't even bother to add it to the ones where I used the gray combination with, because you wouldn't be able to see them. But this way it makes them look a little bit different, makes them stand out a little bit more. And you can use any color gel pen here, but obviously I'm keeping with the same color theme throughout the entire card. So once that was all done, you can see that I have a big gap there on the top because I didn't measure my letters correctly, but I am going to trim that down. Now we have the panel already cut down. This is already cut down to 5¼ by 4. I'm going to take another 1/4 inch off the top. So because I take another 1/4 inch off the top, I'm going to have to take a little bit off the sides as well. So I took 1/8 inch off of both sides. Some of the presents are kind of hanging off the edge, but that's fine. It kind of just makes it look as if it's a seamless pattern. I'm also going to take a piece of black cardstock and cut this down to 1/4 inch larger than my panel and 1/4 inch smaller than my card base. And that way we can glue everything together. Now I like to mat my panels onto black cardstock. Typically I don't have this much of it showing, but being I had to cut down my panel a little bit more than usual, I'm okay with it. It really makes your panel kind of pop because it is so simple. So I am going to finish off by adding a whole lot of shimmer to just the letters themselves. Now you want to be careful depending on the shimmer pen you're using. I'm using a Spectrum Noir shimmer pen, which I don't have an issue with, but I know some of them, especially the Nuvo one, they can kind of make your colors move a little bit. So it must be alcohol based or have alcohol in it, because it does move your colors. But there's that red area. I don't know whether you can see it on that H where I had a streak. I just went over it with my lightest color several times just to lighten it up. But it's still there. So I am going to finish off with, of course, my glossy accents because I just can't get enough of the glossy accents. I definitely need an intervention. I can't make a card without glossy accents. So I'm just going to go over the letters themselves. I'm being very, very careful to go around the presents, but you can always go directly over them if that's what you prefer. I just want my letters to stand out a little bit more than they already do. And that is it. That is the card for today using a non-Christmas stamp set, which I don't think I've ever done before. So today I am collaborating with Shanna, and I will leave her information and the link to her video below. So please go check her video out as well. Thank you guys so much for stopping by and have a great day. Bye.